All right, welcome to another deep dive. So today we're looking at, this is a tough one, honestly. The flooding in Pikeville, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've got this CBS News article from February 17th of 2025. And wow, it's just the pictures. It's hard hitting. This is serious stuff. So we're going to try to unpack what happened,
Yeah.
what it means for the people in Pikeville.
It's certainly a reminder about how powerful nature can be, even for a smaller town.
Yeah, for sure. And the article, it uses some pretty strong language. They talk about significant, they say devastating flooding,
Right.
and the town's practically underwater from the looks of it. There's even, they mention over 50 swift water rescues.
Yeah. Wow, that's
I
incredible.
mean, what does that even entail? What does a swift water rescue look like?
I mean, can you imagine? You've got these rescuers, right?
Yeah.
They're battling these crazy currents, sometimes in those, inflatable boats.
Oh, right.
They use ropes, special equipment, all to reach people. People are trapped in their homes or even their cars.
It's scary.
It's dangerous work. It really is. And 50 rescues, that's 50 lives, in the middle of all this chaos.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to wrap your head around the scale of all this, I know, just from reading. But there's this one detail that really stuck with me. There's a photo of a church, and the steps are completely underwater.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of, it puts things in perspective, like every part of life in Pikeville is affected.
Right. Yeah, every corner of the town.
Even the spiritual side of things.
And tragically, it's not just about the damage to property. The article says there were at least 11 deaths
Oh no.
across Kentucky, all related to the weather. Flooding, it's often underestimated, but it can be so dangerous, especially when it happens this quickly.
Yeah, terrifying. So they do mention the town floodgate system and how the water levels started to go down by Monday morning. So what are these floodgates? How do they work?
Well, think of them like barriers.
Okay.
They control the water flow. They're meant to protect areas from being flooded.
Right.
They can be huge, these structures. Sometimes they're part of a dam, or sometimes they're more localized, built into the town itself. And when there's a flood risk, they close these gates to try and stop the water.
So they basically acted like a shield for Pikeville.
To a certain extent, I mean, they helped. They lessened the impact, but no system's perfect. The fact that there's still so much flooding, it just shows how powerful this storm was.
Right. And even when the water goes down, the recovery is just starting. What are some of the longer term problems that Pikeville faces?
Well, you're going to have a lot of water damage, right, to homes and businesses. There's the risk of landslides because the ground's so saturated.
Oh, yeah.
And all the infrastructure, things like roads, power lines, even the water systems, they're all disrupted. It's going to take a while to get things back to normal.
Yeah, and economically, I can't even imagine what this does to a town the size of Pikeville.
It's huge. The repairs, the lost business, people might even have to leave their homes. And for a town of about 7,000 people, that impact's really concentrated.
Yeah, it's a lot to handle. But one thing that stands out in the article, it's really inspiring. They talk about how the community is coming together. Like Mayor Carter, he praises the first responders.
Yeah,
They answered something like 130 emergency calls.
that's amazing.
It sounds like everyone's pitching in, to help each other out.
That kind of spirit, it's so important. When things are tough, people helping each other, volunteers, businesses offering support, that's what makes a community strong, helps them bounce back.
Yeah, absolutely. They highlight one area it was hit really bad, the Lakeview subdivision
Oh, yeah.
near Pikeville Commons. They say almost every house there was affected. It makes you think about like urban planning
Yeah.
and, how we build in these areas.
It's a crucial point. Where we build, how we build, it all affects how vulnerable we are to these kind of events.
Right.
Sometimes we might be building in areas that, historically were always prone to flooding. Or maybe the infrastructure, what we already have, just wasn't designed for this kind of extreme weather.
And then you've got Pikeville High School. They were using it as a shelter, and then they had to evacuate it. It's kind of ironic, right?
Oh, wow.
The place meant to be safe becomes part of the emergency.
Yeah.
Really shows how these disasters, how they kind of cascade, What we rely on can suddenly become part of the problem, and then there's the disruption to school. Just adds another layer to everything.
Yeah, for sure. And the picture in the article, the football field, it's completely flooded.
Yeah, it's a powerful image.
It's more than just missing classes, right? This disrupts routines, that sense of normalcy. And then there's the psychological impact, experiencing something like this. It's traumatic. It goes way beyond just fixing the buildings. It's about rebuilding lives and the whole community.
It really is. It's like, it's a reminder that behind all the headlines, behind the statistics, there are real people, real stories. And it sounded like Pikeville's story. It's about resilience,
Yeah,
about determination, about a community coming together when things are tough.
yeah. It's a story that's still unfolding, but it's one we should definitely pay attention to, learn from, and, support in any way we can.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about the human side of this whole thing, and it really gets you thinking, like, could this happen again? And is there anything we can do to prevent it?
Yeah, these are the big questions, and they really bring us to this bigger conversation about climate change
Right, climate
and
change.
how it affects these extreme weather events.
Okay, yeah, I've heard a lot about climate change, but I'm not sure I really get how it connects to something like this flood in Pikeville.
Well, the science is pretty clear on this. A warmer planet, it leads to more extreme weather, and that includes these heavier rain events. Basically, the atmosphere, it warms up because of these greenhouse gases,
Right.
and that means it can hold more moisture, and all that moisture, well, it has to go somewhere, and often that means these huge downpours over a really short time.
So it's not just like more rain overall. It's like when it rains, it really, really rains.
Exactly. It's like, imagine a bigger sponge, right? The
Okay.
warmer atmosphere, it's like that bigger sponge. It holds more water, and then it just dumps it all at once. And that leads to flooding, especially in places that aren't built to handle that much water so fast.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like places that maybe had heavy rain before, like Pikeville, now they're dealing with even more extreme stuff because of climate change.
Exactly. And it's not just how much rain, it's how fast it comes down. If you get like several inches in just a few hours, like what happened in Pikeville, the drainage systems, they just can't keep up. And boom, you've got flash flooding.
Wow. So this is kind of scary stuff. Is this mostly a problem for smaller towns, or are the big cities at risk too?
Climate change, it affects everyone. It doesn't matter where you are, how big the city is. Coastal cities, they have to worry about the sea level rising, those storm surges. But inland, you're still going to see these heavier rains, flash floods, even extreme heat. It's a problem everywhere.
So what can we do about it? I mean, is it too late to fix things, or are we just like stuck with these disasters now?
There's no easy answer to that. It's complicated. Dealing with climate change, it takes a lot of different approaches. We need to work on two things: mitigation and adaptation.
Mitigation and adaptation, I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, so mitigation, that means trying to slow down climate change, reducing those greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
So that means things like switching to renewable energy, using energy more efficiently, protecting forests.
Makes sense. But what about the stuff that's already happening? The impacts we're seeing now. We can't just ignore those, can we?
Absolutely not. And that's where adaptation comes in. It's about adjusting to the changes that are, well, that are already here. So that might be building stronger levees, designing infrastructure that can handle these extremes, setting up early warning systems so people know when a flood's coming, things like that.
So it's kind of like we're fighting a battle on two fronts, trying to slow down the problem, but also figuring out how to live with what's already here.
That's a great way to put it. And both of those fronts are important. We have to reduce emissions to avoid the worst case scenarios, but we also have to adapt to what's already happening.
It's a lot to take in. It feels kind of overwhelming, like it needs this huge global effort. What can one person do? Or even a small town like Pikeville, does it even make a difference?
I get that feeling. Climate change is a global problem, but that doesn't mean individual actions don't matter. In fact, it's the opposite. It's all about collective action. And that starts at the local level.
Okay.
So what can people do? Well, a lot of it starts with awareness, understanding the science, seeing how it affects its own community, learning about the solutions. That's step one.
Right, knowledge is power, as they say. But what about like concrete things people can actually do?
Well, there's a lot we can do in our daily lives to, reduce our carbon footprint, choosing energy-efficient appliances, driving less, eating less meat, supporting businesses that are trying to be sustainable.
Yeah, those are good ideas, but sometimes it feels like, my little actions, they're just a drop in the bucket compared to this huge problem.
I hear you. But remember, it's about all of us doing our part. Millions of people making small changes, that adds up. And when you make those changes, you might inspire other people to do the same. It creates this ripple effect.
So it's not just what we do ourselves, it's about getting other people on board too.
Exactly. And don't forget about politics. Climate change is a political issue. We need to elect leaders who are going to take it seriously and support policies that address both mitigation and adaptation.
So it's personal responsibility, collective action, and getting involved in politics.
That's it. And we can't forget about community-level solutions. Towns like Pikeville, they can invest in infrastructure that's flood-resistant. They can set up those early warning systems. They can even change their zoning laws so people don't build in areas that are prone to flooding.
Yeah, all good ideas, but I imagine all that takes a lot of resources and expertise and coordination, between the different levels of government.
You're right, it's complicated, but it's not impossible. There are organizations, government programs that can help. They provide funding, technical support, and the benefits of doing this, they far outweigh the costs of doing nothing.
It seems like Pikeville, having gone through this terrible flood, they're in a good position to be a leader in this whole climate resilience thing.
Absolutely, they've seen firsthand what extreme weather can do, and they're already showing so much resilience, so much community spirit in their recovery. If they can include climate adaptation in that rebuilding process, they can protect themselves from future disasters. And they can be an example for other communities that are facing similar challenges.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening, but I gotta admit, it's also a little bit, well, overwhelming. Climate change is such a big, complex issue, it's hard to know where to even start.
I get it. It's easy to get lost in the enormity of it all, but we don't have to solve everything at once. Every little step we take, every conversation we have, every action we support, it all contributes to a better future, a more sustainable future.
That's a good point. We don't have to be perfect, we just have to start somewhere. And maybe, just maybe, if we work together, we can turn this whole challenge into an opportunity to create a better world.
That's the spirit. And remember, Pikeville's story isn't over. They're just beginning to recover and rebuild, and they're showing everyone what real community resilience looks like. We can all learn from them and support them as they face the challenges ahead.
Yeah, and their story really highlights something crucial. The human impact of climate change. It's not just about data and science. It's about real people, real communities, and the very real struggles they're going through.
It shows how connected we all are. What happens in one small town in Kentucky, it affects everyone. Climate change is a global issue. It needs global solutions. But those solutions, they often start at the local level, with individuals, communities, towns like Pikeville taking action.
So we talked about climate change and, kind of the bigger picture, but let's circle back to Pikeville for a minute. The article, it mentioned that Pikeville High School had to be evacuated. First it was a shelter, and then the water got too high. What does that mean for the students, their education, all that?
It's a huge disruption. I mean, think about it. They're missing classes, probably lost textbooks and equipment. And that's not even touching on the emotional side of things. Some of these kids might have lost their homes.
Right.
Or they're dealing with, the trauma of what happened.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine trying to focus on schoolwork when you've got all that going on.
Exactly. And the article said there was significant flooding in the building itself. So you've got classrooms, labs, the library, they all need to be repaired. And that takes time. In the meantime, the kids might be in these temporary spaces or having to go to school in shifts. It's not exactly the best learning environment.
Yeah, far from ideal. And, beyond the academics, there's the whole issue of, their well-being.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these students, they saw the destruction firsthand. They saw their families struggling. Some of them might have even experienced loss. That kind of trauma, it sticks with you. It makes it really hard to concentrate on schoolwork.
So it's not just about fixing the building. It's about, taking care of the students' emotional and mental health, too.
Exactly. Recovering from something like this, it's a whole person thing. It takes teachers, mental health professionals, community groups, even government agencies. Everyone needs to work together to help these kids process what they've been through and, start to feel normal again.
The article did say that the school district, they're determined to get things back on track, but it sounds like it's going to take a lot more than just, cleaning up and opening the doors again.
It's a long process, and it takes a real understanding of what these kids are facing. It's about making sure they feel safe and supported at school, addressing any gaps in their learning from the disruption, and giving them access to mental health resources so they can cope with the emotional impact of the flood.
So what can we do, people outside of Pikeville? How can we help?
Well, a few things come to mind. First, stay informed. Share accurate information, raise awareness. Second, donate. There are reputable organizations out there doing relief work on the ground. And finally, support policies that address climate change, both mitigation and adaptation like we talked about. That's crucial for preventing these kinds of disasters in the future.
So awareness, concrete action, and, pushing for long-term solutions. It seems like those are good lessons no matter what issue we're talking about.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to remember we've focused on Pikeville, but this is just one example. Extreme weather events are happening more and more often, all around the world. what we learned from Pikeville, we can apply it to our own communities as we try to, create a more sustainable and resilient future.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and as always, keep asking questions, stay informed, and be the change you want to see in the world. Until next time, 60-0, 62.